Good evening, everyone. I'm David Johnson, Transformate Consulting. Those are all the services that Transformate offers. And I want to give a plug for my dear friend and colleague, Cassandra Williams. She's the brains behind Educational Innovations 360 Degrees. And those are all the services she and her firm offers. Look us up on LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to talk with you about your projects. We have as our guest tonight, Dr. Alaina Szlachta. How are you, Alaina?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. And I am going to flip to the slide that gives us all your background. Alaina Szlachta, PhD, founder and lead learning architect by Design Development Solutions, Austin, Texas, helps professional development companies use data enablement and curriculum design to show real-time outcomes of their programs. She is the founder and creator of Measurement Made Easy, a community of practice for impact-focused learning professionals to share ideas and playbooks around measurement and evaluation. Dr. Szlachta is also the author of the upcoming ATD press book titled Measurement and Evaluation on a Shoestring, a resource written to make measurement and evaluation easier and more accessible for anyone regardless of their expertise. Impressive. What did you study in your doctoral program?
I studied culturally responsive sexuality education.
Then how did you find your way into measurement and evaluation?
Well, the work that you can imagine I did during my doctorate program and afterward had a lot to do with public health. And all of that public health work was funded by governments, philanthropic individuals, and we had to show that what we were doing was really working. And when you think about sexual health, people really want to know that what you're doing is working because it is a hot topic. So all of that experience was the foundation for me leading up to where I am today, really helping others with measurement and evaluation.
Now, would you define for us what a professional development company is?
That would be the vendor that you seek to do a training program for your educators at a school district for their professional development days, a vendor that does leadership development, team building. They have expertise in something like me around measurement and evaluation, and they want to bring the vendor into a corporate environment, a government environment to offer some skill building opportunities, whether it's a one-time event or it's a very in-depth 3 to 6 month 12-month training program. So those people, they need to show the outcomes of their programs, and they often hire me to do that.
And when you say real-time outcomes, what does that mean?
It means that we don't have to wait until 1, 3, or 12 months after a program is over to prove that it's facilitating the outcomes that we're seeking. So I specialize in the real-time outcomes, which is primarily in skill development, changes in mindset, and showing key performance changes inside of a training program.
So does that entail developing assessment instruments as well?
It can. It totally depends on what's the change that a professional development provider is offering. And sometimes, yeah, a lot of providers have their own assessment tools because of the types of programs are niche and it makes sense for them to have their own in-house assessments. Other times we work with assessment providers who have developed something that is the right tool to use to demonstrate changes in aptitude.
And what is Measurement Made Easy?
So it's my favorite 3 words strung together. No, I'm kidding. It's basically a community of practice. And I love tying measurement and easy together because I think historically many of us are incredibly intimidated by measurement and evaluation. And so to create a community of practice designed to break the barriers down, to make that process a little bit easier, that's what that's all about.
And you have a book coming up, Measurement and Evaluation on a Shoestring.
Yes.
What makes it on a shoestring? So that implies that measurement and evaluation is costly if your title can say on a shoestring. So what makes measurement and evaluation costly, and how does one make it on a shoestring?
So I think one of the biggest barriers to measurement and evaluation historically has been cost. And I think that has a lot to do with some preconceived notions about what are we measuring and evaluating and what's the optimal metric. And many of us think that return on investment is that optimal metric. And not to say that it's not, and not to say that ROI is not important, but it is an incredibly costly process, time consuming, to be able to isolate the effect of training and say that training had this % of an effect on sales, and be able to do the calculations to demonstrate the time, the cost of a vendor, the cost of internal development, all of that combined, the % that we believe that training influenced sales, how much sales came in, and then what's the ROI of that. That's a really time consuming process. And there's cost associated with that. It doesn't have to be that way. And it's not to diminish the importance of ROI. It's to say that ROI isn't always the optimal metric. And if you figure out what are those metrics that you can focus on to show the immediate and then the longer term outcomes of training, you can do it in a lot less costly of a way.
Okay.
And that's
well,
what the
our
book is all
topic
about.
tonight is titled "The One Skill Education Professionals Need to Be Successful."
Yes.
So, Alaina, I've got to ask you, why is one capitalized? Are they the initials for something else?
I wish it were that sophisticated and intentional. It's actually kind of a bad habit. So in my previous life, before starting my own business, I worked for Keller Williams Realty, and they have a book. Gary Keller and Jay Papasan co-wrote a book called The One Thing, in which they capitalized one. And I adore that book. I adore the perspective, and was able to help out on occasion with some of their training and programmatic offerings. And so now anytime I talk about the one fill in the blank skill, thing, perspective, activity, I always capitalize it. And it's just because of the One Thing book. Yeah.
So it's bolding and shouting.
Yeah.
At the same
Let's
time.
pay attention to this one thing. Yeah.
Okay. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, we have 4 topics: navigate disruption as the new norm, know if what you're doing is actually working, develop your pivoting ability, and
be change ready.
Yeah, be change ready in your work, organization, and career. So, where would you like to start as I play around with this and change our change our screen? Where would you like to start?
So I think we should answer the question to the one skill, because of course it is the title. I don't want to leave anybody hanging, like they have to wait to the last minute of our conversation to get the answer to that question. So I would say, David, let's start with, what is the one thing, that one skill that people should be focusing on in order to be change ready, to navigate disruption, and be prepared for anything in their career. So
what is the one?
That one thing. So that one thing is actually the second topic on the list, which is using data, measurement, and evaluation. Not surprising, that is my expertise. Being able to use that to know if what you're doing is working. So it's kind of a twofold. The one skill would be what I think of as data literacy. It doesn't have to be that you're doing the work of measuring and evaluating, although those things are interconnected. So I would say that your skill is data literacy. And then how you apply it is to be constantly knowing, investigating, evaluating, is what I'm doing actually working? And the ability to do that in a really rapid way using data to show yourself, if not your stakeholders, but just for me to know that what I'm doing is working, whether it's in my marketing initiatives in my business, with my clients, helping in my community of practice, the people that are there to know that what they're doing is working. And using data, that's the thing that we all need to get better at, such that we can constantly improve, we can get promoted, we can be effective in future roles, etc.
Now, Alaina, you see me smiling and laughing and almost being uncomfortable here, because it sounds so simple. But in many ways, it's not, because sometimes, many times, people will buy a product or engage a service where they have no idea what the outcome, they have no idea of what outcome they want.
That's right. So how do you know if you're being effective if you don't know what the goal or the outcome was?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really big challenge. Yeah.
So how do you work with such clients, and what is it that you do with them to help them answer the questions they didn't even know they had?
Yeah. So David, you asked me, when we were backstage before going live, you asked me, how's my business going? And I'm happy to be perfectly transparent about my business and what I'm doing because I believe that that's helpful. So you asked, how's it going? And I said, well, there are a lot of different metrics that I could look to tell you how successful I'm being in my business.
Mm-hmm.
One metric would be revenue. One metric would be growth in terms of acquisition of new clients or your new client pipeline. Another
Mm-hmm.
metric could be engagement and trust and rapport with a certain audience. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of ways that a business can be successful. And so, what I'm focused on right now, back to your question about what's the outcome that you're seeking, as
Mm-hmm.
a business, I have the privilege, so I'm just going to put that out there. I have the privilege to focus on writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not focused on revenue. I'm focused on writing a book and practicing putting quality content out into the world
Mm-hmm.
and working with people to get immediate feedback on what are their challenges, what are their thoughts and perspectives around measurement and evaluation, because that's my investigative work to make sure that the
Right.
book that I write truly solves the problems
Right.
that people are experiencing. And
Mm-hmm.
so by that metric, what's the goal? What's the outcome you're seeking? I'm seeking to build trust and rapport with people, build relationships
Right.
with people.
Okay.
And
That's
yeah.
those are excellent examples because it
Mm-hmm.
leads to my next question or my next two questions.
Yes.
When people purchase a product or purchase a service and implement it,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing what their intended effect, desired effect might have been,
Mm-hmm.
there's an opportunity that is missed.
Right.
And that is to collect baseline data.
That's right.
How the heck you know where you're going where you don't know where you started? How do you know that you've arrived at the particular place when you don't know where you started?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you work with such clients and what do you do in such situations?
So there's two things. I get this question a lot in my community of practice. Is it worthwhile to go evaluate the effectiveness of a training program when we didn't have any baseline data and we didn't really have an intended outcome that we were seeking to influence?
Right.
And so the question is, well, what are you trying to evaluate? And so, can you evaluate without baseline data? Absolutely. There's probably, in fact, a ton of data that you could look to before training. You can back your way into finding some data to help you see how effective that you were. But you've got to start with what's the outcome that you intended for this program,
Right.
and then figure out what makes sense. What data would help us know where we were before the program and where we're at today. But like you said, all of that goes back to what was the change that we wanted to see.
Exactly.
And how can you operationalize that in such a way that you can get data to give you the insights? That's the piece that's really important.
And even if it were not data, some measurement of change where you could say yes or no that this program, this product, this service worked. If it didn't work, you want to know that just as well as you want to know whether it did work.
Even more so, in fact.
Even more so if it didn't. Right. So that you can make better choices of how to spend your professional development dollars.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You mentioned something that I think is a really important question in our behind the scenes. I wish we could have recorded the backstage conversation because that was so good. So if we're going back to what's the one skill, and that skill is data literacy. You asked me, what do you consider data? And I think that that's a really important part of this equation. And you asked, well, do you consider qualitative data? And my answer to you is data is anything that can give you insight to help you make more informed decisions. So that could be anecdotal stories and the themes from those stories that you hear in the hallways, that you hear in a variety of ways you see on LinkedIn. They call it social, what's it called? It's something like there's technology that crawls social media to use the stories and the posts to find themes of like, what are people thinking about? What are the trends, right? So we can use we can use people's posts on LinkedIn as data, and it all depends on how we want to use that. How do we make that insightful for us to make a decision? And that to me is data literacy. How do we find insight or create insights through anything? Numbers, it's really just numbers or stories and language, like
Alaina,
language
we
models.
could go
Yeah.
on and on and
Mm-hmm.
on, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of questions I want to ask related to this
Yeah.
particular topic, but we have 3 other topics. So
I
where would
know.
you like to go now? Navigation, disruption as the new norm,
Yeah.
develop your pivoting ability, be change ready in your work, organization, and career.
Yeah. So I would say that the disruption one is the easiest. And that is simply a statement that disruption is the new norm. And that's it. And we have heard time and time again because of COVID, oh, I can't wait for things to go back to normal. And I just want to say that we are going to experience more disruption and more change with the presence of technology and artificial intelligence and just all the things happening environmentally, climate change and global economies and just changes in administrations and policies and leadership, right? Like the change is coming at us faster than it ever has before, and so we need to just accept that that is the environment that we are now operating in until further notice.
Until further notice. Navigate disruption as the new norm. All right, so
Yeah.
I will buy that. I will buy that, but I'm kind of stuck in the word disruption.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the buzz term that everybody wants to be disruptive. I'm your
Mm-hmm.
new disruptor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, is there another word that it means the same thing and doesn't have the baggage that
Sure.
disruption has?
I would say navigating the unexpected.
Okay.
Disruption is just something that happens that's unexpected, and it could be good or bad. So unexpected, I think, has a negative connotation to it because we like to be in control. We like to feel prepared. But the reality is that unexpected things happen all the time. And sometimes they have great consequences. Like this book, I did some informal research when I was in India traveling. I just interviewed a few people across the globe and had some insights about challenges in learning and development. I spoke at a few conferences and somebody approached me and was like, hey, we're looking for an author. You want to write this book? That was an unexpected thing. I never could have imagined somebody would come to me and be like, hey, are you interested? Put a proposal out there and let's see where that goes. And I said, yes. That was a great unexpected thing. But then, of course, there are tons of unexpected things that can have really negative outcomes. It disrupted my life.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, do you intend to be a disruptor?
I think disruption is more about unexpected things that happen that have consequences that we have to adapt to. And if we choose not to adapt to them, there are consequences also, and those can be negative. So disruption to me is something that's put in front of you that forces you to make a choice that you probably weren't prepared to make. And it changes your focus, it changes your energy. And that to me, the experience of being disrupted, it's like I'm driving in my car and a dog runs in front of me. My driving is being disrupted by the thing that crossed the street. It was unexpected. It makes me act differently. And immediately, I have to make an immediate reaction.
So now how does that relate to the one skill education professionals need to be successful?
Yeah. So it is about, if we are constantly going to be disrupted, think about it as like someone comes to your desk and you're trying to write away or you're trying to build a curricula and you've got a deadline and your neighbor comes to you and is like, hey, Alaina, you want to go for coffee? I just disrupted, right? So if that's the new norm, then how do we know how effective we are inside of disruption? And data and having your own data to help you understand, is this the path I should still be on? Should I take a left or should I take a right? And without having good data that you can rely on, it's really difficult to react in the most appropriate way when disruption happens. So for me, the pivoting, so we're going to the next topic, being able to be change ready and being able to pivot, all really to me, and this is speaking from my own experience, depends on the quality of the data I have access to go investigate, is what I just did still appropriate for what now needs to happen going forward? And if I don't have good data and insight, then I'm just going to make a decision, or I'm going to feel like I'm flying blind, and that's even more uncomfortable.
Pivot, that's another buzz term, popular term these days. And I completely understand it. Even if I don't use the word, I know I have pivoted lots of times. So how do you use pivot in this case?
This case, pivoting is an intentional choice to do something different.
intentional choice to do something different.
Mhm.
And how does that relate to the one skill? Know if what you're doing is actually working.
So ideally, we have the data, and oftentimes we have to collect it. So here's a simple example from my personal life. I used to be a big spender, and that was not working for me. You can imagine. If I wanted to save money, which is a goal, and I was spending too much, I didn't have any data to help me understand, because I wasn't using a credit card consistently. And you know how credit cards now, they tell you what categories you're spending. I didn't do any of that. I was spending haphazardly. I was using cash, debit card, credit card. I didn't know where my money was going, but I knew I was spending way more than I should be, and that was a problem. So
Mhm.
I needed to create some data. So what I ended up doing first, I made a spreadsheet and I would write, to hold me accountable, I would write down everything I spent and I would bucket it in categories. Well, then I realized that my credit card did that for me. And so I started to just use one credit card for all of my spending, such that I
Mhm.
could see where's my money going every month. Now I've been doing that for 3 years, and I can see how my spending is month over month, year over year, and it helps me to make informed decisions. So yeah, that would be an example of how do we create data to help us make a pivot, which is an intentional choice to do something different in the face of disruption. I need to change my spending habits because all of a sudden I realized I'm spending too much money.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now let's say it's a professional development company.
Hmm.
How could they use, or give us an example of how they could pivot the same way you pivoted with your spending?
So imagine that you have a training program, and most of us believe that our training, we believe, and I mean that we don't know, but we suspect that our training is going to influence some key outcomes. So you want to be able to collect data to know if your program is truly influencing those outcomes. So here's
Mhm.
an example. A leadership training program had 3 outcomes. It was designed to give people more time back at the end of each week. People were
Mhm.
overworking. We wanted them to work less hours. We wanted them to work more hours on strategic activities versus individual contributor activities. This training was for managers. And then we wanted them to have more optimistic feelings about their job. And that, with the training, was all about delegation, teaching people
Mhm.
how to delegate individual contributor tasks such that they had more time of their own.
Mhm.
So we collected data on how well people were delegating. We collected data on every single week. Were they time blocking on their calendar? How many hours were they working? What were they doing? What were they spending their time on? And we found, by doing that every single week, we collected this information. At the end of 4 weeks, we found that people were working the same amount of hours. And we found that the time blocking didn't make a difference. So we had a whole module teaching people about time blocking. And we realized that time blocking didn't influence people's ability to delegate. So what we ended up doing is we gave more, and people said in their feedback, we wish we had more time to practice some of these key activities, and we needed to make an informed choice around what do we take out, because we liked the 4 weeks, we liked the 2 hours twice a week or 90 minutes twice a week. We didn't want to extend the training. We wanted to shorten it. So we needed to figure out what can we eliminate from this program such that we can give more time to the practice and troubleshooting of some of the activities that people were doing in the program. And we use
Okay.
data to do that.
Okay. Now I can dig into that, but I won't.
Yeah.
Thoughts came to mind about controlling for uh,
Oh,
extraneous
for sure.
factors, let's say. But I won't go there. I won't go
Well, the
there.
good news is this is why we collect baseline data, because the extraneous factors are there at baseline. They're
Uh-huh.
still there at the end.
Uh-huh.
So the kind of environment that you're in, if you have kids, if you have dogs, if you're going to the gym or not, all those extraneous variables that affect how much you work, the
Uh-huh.
environment's not changing.
Uh-huh.
So in some ways, that's why we collect baseline data, because we
Uh-huh.
want to know, with the reality of your life,
Uh-huh.
how many hours are you working? Let's not
Uh-huh.
change your life. We're just trying to change your delegation and try to get you to
Right.
delegate more.
Right.
And so we're trying to isolate that, but we're
Yeah.
not changing anything else. So
Yeah.
in some
Your word
ways,
isolate is a good word.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Extraneous variables and factors. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Our last topic, be change
yes,
ready in your work, organization, and career. We sort of touched on that, but
yeah,
please elaborate more if you would.
yeah. So if we tie this all together, if disruption or the unexpected is the new norm, I think we have to just accept that there is no going back to predictable, comfortable, controllable. There's going to be a lot of extraneous variables, David, and that's the new norm. So that's our environment that we're operating in. It's essential to be successful in that environment if you don't have access to data, to create it, like I did with my budgeting. I didn't have any data on where I was spending money. Someone didn't have any data in that leadership program around how people were spending their time, and we wanted to get insight into that. So what matters to you? Figure that out. What data do you need to collect to help you know if it's working, whatever you're doing is working? And when you have that data, it gives you the opportunity to be proactive versus reactive. So when disruptions happen, you can go, okay, let me look to my data. What are the insights? What are the trends? What are people saying? What's going on? What have I learned from the past that I can apply to make the most informed decision going forward? And that would be using data literacy to be change ready in the face of disruption.
Data literacy. So if you say change ready, see what I'm thinking is, and then you use the word proactive, and my dissertation is on strategic planning, and that's a key word in strategic planning, being proactive.
That's right.
Having a good sense of what's coming down the pike before it arrives. So when you say change ready, how can someone predict what's coming down the pike so that he or she can be prepared, thus be change ready if and when this disruption arrives?
Yeah. One of the biggest examples is marketplace. So you have a product, and if your product is maybe new, you have market share because you're the first one on the marketplace. Well, as soon as something hot happens, a million other people are going to try to do it better than you. So to be change ready, it would be to anticipate, hey, we were first to the finish line in this one race. We were the first one to market. Well, we know competitors are going to be coming, and they're going to be coming more quickly to catch up to us. How do we continue to differentiate ourselves? Being change ready would have data from the users. If you're the first to market, you should be able to get first to data collect how people are using your product, what features, what things would they want for the future, so you have more insight more quickly than your competitors to be able to pivot and evolve to continue to offer a product or a service that stays ahead of what people want. It's almost like you're so good at developing your product, you offer a feature before people ask for it because you have the trends and the data to predict that.
Right. So I was going to say, it sounds as if you're suggesting that one is always doing some sort of market research or even internal research to see what types of skills a worker might need in order to be ready for the future when it arrives.
Yeah, I would say the question to ask yourself, because we're all in different positions and we all make different decisions every day, and that is, with the work I do, what's the value of my work, and what are my core goals of the work I'm currently doing? And then what data do I need to have access to such that when I have to make critical decisions that affect the work, the bottom line of my work, whatever those outcomes and goals are, I have data to help me be as informed as possible. And that's an investigation we have to do for ourselves. The answer for each one of us will be different.
Right. Well, man, we've covered a lot of topics today, and we certainly had some stimulating conversations. With all that we've discussed, what would be the takeaway you would want our audience to have from this conversation?
I would say be exploratory and think of yourself as an investigator. I'm a researcher, and I think that's a lot of fun. So think of yourself always, forever on, as a researcher, and everything you're doing, you're investigating. What am I observing? What am I seeing in my data? What am I seeing out in the world to help me get insights to make predictions for the future, or to be able to make informed choices? So just be that researcher. Just add that into your arsenal of ways of thinking about the world and your work. And I think that will do a lot of service for you, for your
And what's
future.
the call to action? What do you want people to do with what they've learned from our conversation?
Well, I hope everybody will want to become more data literate. And I have a tool to help them with that. So I have a community of practice.
Right.
which is called Measurement Made Easy, which we already heard about. And that would be my call to action to you, is to find me on LinkedIn, check out the community of practice. And if it feels like the right place for you to build the data literacy skills that you need, please join us.
Okay. And we've talked about a lot of things, and
Mhm.
maybe we were very superficial. If people want to know more, if they want to go greater depth, how do they contact you?
Again, LinkedIn is the best way to find me. I go in depth about tons of stuff on measurement and evaluation, because what you said is right on. We need to go in more depth, because that's going to be the most helpful thing to do. So find me on LinkedIn. I've got a lot of great stuff also on my website. And I have a YouTube channel with micro learning videos that break down different strategies and playbooks for measuring different things in the world of learning and development.
Well, Alaina, this has been great fun. And in closing, I'd like to again acknowledge my dear colleague Cassandra Williams. She's the brains behind Educational Innovation 360 Degrees. Alaina, it's been a delight. Thank you for being our
Same.
guest, and
Thank you.
good night to all of our audience.
Good night, everyone.